Austin, Texas in 5 minutes or less. This is Texas, the Lone Star State. This is Travis County, the location of Austin. Austin is the 11th largest city in the United States. It is also one of the only left-leaning cities in Texas. So how did it go from a Native American sanctuary to one of the largest metropolitan areas in the United States? The colonization of Texas and Central America began with Native American conquest. In the 1680s, the Spanish first began colonizing regions of Texas by force, forcibly converting natives to Christianity and establishing themselves in scattered locations throughout the Americas and in Texas. Slavery in Central America began with native peoples and groups, and eventually they became sick of it, launching the Mexican War for Independence, which freed most of Central America from Spanish rule. Mexico is now its own nation, but the main part of this story happens in Texas. As we know, the United States loves money, and Texas land was ideal for cotton farming. Selling cotton equals money, and Texas had good land for farming cotton. So the United States manifested its own destiny into Spanish territory by arranging for a group of its citizens, about 300 of them, led by Stephen F. Austin, to settle in Mexican territory, with both countries agreeing that it would be economically beneficial. Remember, this guy and his 300 friends, they now number in the thousands and have full-scale towns. Mexico needs a stronger government to control these towns, so they introduced Siete Leyes. Siete Ley gives the Mexican government far too much power in the eyes of the settlers, so they revolt in the thousands. This revolt is the Texan Revolution, which ends in 1836, and Texas wins and becomes the Republic of Texas. The Republic of Texas says they are a sovereign nation and that their territory is theirs, but Mexico sees them just as a rebellious group still within Mexico, which is important for later. Side note, Texas loves the United States and basically copied the entire Constitution of the United States because they love the United States so much. From 1836 to 1844, they were declined entry into the United States, until 1845 when the United States finally said yes to annexing them. Mexico now into war. The United States just annexed Mexican land that isn't really Mexican land, but is still Mexican land in the eyes of Mexico. Mexico was destroyed in the Mexican-American War and lost half of its territory in the Mexican Cession. Remember Stephen F. Austin? Texas named the capital after him. The capital is now Austin, Texas. There's a short intermission after it was founded, though, the Civil War. Austin had a small population, so only contributed a small number of troops to the war cause, but the Confederacy lost, and the South was mad they had to give up slavery. Austin, however, was very small and had a small slave population, so they were okay with the changes. And then Reconstruction ended, and sharecropping and black codes and segregation was introduced. Austin followed suit in such policies, but less brutally. Late 19th century, Austin is broke. No natural resources like oil, and they don't have amazing land for cotton. Austin, despite being the capital, faced economic hardship. Entered the Transcontinental Railroad. Austinites began making money through trade, and with the newly found revenue, the Christian and non-plantation community of Austin wanted schools, so they founded their first public elementary school. In further pursuit of education and wealth through the studies of technology, Austin founded its signature college, UT Austin. Side note, in Little Oopsie, Austin in 1900 had their dam break and 30 of its citizens were killed. To make matters worse, between 1900 and 1970, Austin's economy stagnated. During World War II, they had one magnesium factory that was closed because it was so efficient and made a surplus of magnesium. But then by a literal miracle, Austin saw a huge economic boom and is now one of the wealthiest cities in America. Huge companies like Dell and IBM have moved in, and there was lots of undeveloped land. Explosive population growth came after the economic boom, and it's important to note that the old rural capital of Austin, which once had no events besides Sunday church services, now is deemed the live music capital of the world, with hundreds of music performances going on every day. Austin, with a large wealth population and culture deviant from the rest of Texas, became one of the only left-leaning cities in the state. However, it still saw extensive BLM protests, even though it wasn't as harsh as other cities on African Americans in the past. Why? Well, in the 1920s, Austin actually had an extremely segregationist policy, forcing African Americans to live and create businesses within a limited area in Austin. It was called the Negro District, and Austin essentially tried to ignore it up until a few years ago. After protests, the city of Austin recognized its past and apologized. From its rough, dirt-poor beginnings, Austin made a switch from a dull religious life to one of prosperous wealth and culture. Though race tensions are high, they have improved from the past, and the people of Austin probably pay no dues or attention to its history. To be quite frank, up until 40-ish years ago, it was pretty boring. This is the history of Austin, Texas.